Hi, my name is Marley Walter, and I did a global regional analysis on the Southern European Union. And these countries included within this area are Greece, Italy, France, and Spain. So, if you take a look at the map of Europe, you'll notice going from west to east, the countries are Spain in the lower corner, France above it, Italy below that, and then Greece farthest to your right hand side on the east. So, first, I'm going to go through the demographics of each country within the region, talking about the population, the life expectancy, and then focusing on the employment rate, something to consider when we are looking at more of kind of the business aspects alongside the demographics. So, in Greece, the population hovers, of course, around 11 million. This obviously goes up and down throughout time, but when I checked, that was the population. The life expectancy is 71.9 years, so good life expectancy. Most of these countries will have that because they are developed and can sustain longer lives with modern medicine. And then the employment rate is at around 39%. And you can look on the right for each of these to look at a better description of the population based on age groups. So you'll see that the majority of people are kind of in that 35 to life expectancy age group, and they have a lower population of younger people. So moving on to Italy, the population is around 59 million. Their life expectancy is 72.8 years, and their employment rate is 42.7 years. And for this, you kind of see a more uniform distribution with the population. That middle age group, kind of the working class, is still larger, but it's not as spread out from the children to that age group. Demographics in France, population around 65 million, life expectancy 72.6 years, and employment rate is even higher at 49.7. And here the distribution you see is pretty equal throughout. So as we approach a life expectancy, obviously we have a decrease, but from children compared to their highest age group at 45 to 49 are still not that much different. So the population there is pretty uniform throughout. And then finally, the demographics for Spain, 46 million people, life expectancy 72.4 years, so still pretty high, and employment rate at 46.9%. And here you see a very, very normal distribution on the upper end after 40 years of age, and even approaching that from 20 to 24 to that highest point at 40 to 49, with a little bit of a boom in children that were 5 to 14 years. So all of these countries are within the European Union, and all of them use the euro. And the euro right now is equal to about 1.14 US dollars. So has a little bit more buying power. And below you can see the fluctuations in this. One is just within the past year or so on the right, and then the left is over the last 10 years. So you can see points where it was a lot higher, and then obviously dipping off around 2014, kind of slowly making its way back up, and now it's back on a slight decline. You can see that huge dip between July and September of last year as well. So it's kind of interesting to see how much the currency value can change throughout time. So some trade statistics. For all of these countries, U.S. imports are greater than exports, and because this was on a site that had some countries that did very, very little trade with the US. I did leave the numbers in millions, but you can figure out which ones are obviously, it's easy to see which ones are obviously larger. So in Greece, the US exports for 2018, since 2019 is not finished, I couldn't gather all that information. US exports are, of course, higher than imports, and then you can see the same, and you can look at the discrepancies between exports and imports for each country, with imports being a lot higher in most cases, close in some, but big discrepancies between Italy and France, and even a little bit in Spain. So Spain and Greece were not big trade partners with the US. If you look into the history, I mean, they've always kind of been a little bit lower, but Italy and France are big trading partners. And I put the number that they were ranked in our trade partners to date thus far in 2019. So Italy was 12th highest and France was 8th highest. And this has been pretty consistent over time, trading a variety of different goods to the US, which I'll go into further. But those numbers are pretty steady. So top imports and exports overall. So this is just not pertaining to the U.S. Some of these goods do come to the U.S., but this is focusing more on imports and exports from each country to the other countries that they frequently trade with. So exports from Greece include petroleum products and aluminum. Those are the top two. These are all the top two for each. Imports include crude oil, ships, boats, and floating structures. For Italy, the exports are machinery and equipment and transport. The imports are also transport, base metals, and metal products. France, their exports are transport equipment as well. And then aeronautics and automobile industry are included within that transport equipment. And then following up behind that is mechanical equipment, electronic and computer equipment. Their imports include mechanical equipment, electronic and computer equipment as well, and then transport equipment. So similar to the aeronautics and the automobile above. So Spain, their exports are mostly capital goods and then food, beverage, and tobacco products. And then their imports are also capital goods, and then they do a lot of importing of chemicals. So specifically with trade with the U.S., Greece currently ranks 4th among U.S. trading partners. Like I said, Italy and France are much higher up in the ranks. Greece at 74th. So U.S. exports to Greece include medical instruments, petroleum gases, and oil. These are going to be the top three. U.S. imports from Greece include miscellaneous vegetables, aluminum, razors, and razor blades. For Italy, they are 12th with as a U.S. trading partner. U.S. exports to Italy include plasma, vaccines, blood, oil, insulin, hormones, and steroids. And then U.S. imports from Italy include medicines, motor vehicles, defense-related aircraft parts. And then moving on to France, they are 8th among U.S. trading partners, and their exports include U.S. exports include civilian aircraft parts, gasoline, and low-value shipments. And then the imports from France include aircraft engines and engine parts, aircraft, spacecraft, and satellites, and medicines. Finally, Spain is 26th among the U.S. trading partners. U.S. exports to Spain include medicines, petroleum gases, and civilian aircraft parts. And U.S. imports from Spain include gasoline, commercial vehicles, and medicines. So if you look over these as a whole, you can see that there's a lot of technology being exchanged, a lot of aircraft and transportation resources, lots of gases, overall. And then another popular thing is medicine, modern medicine, blood, all hormones and steroids, etc. So all of those things. So looking at the wealth in each country, the average household net wealth, I looked up in US dollars. You can see that Spain has the highest, followed by France, Italy, and then Greece. So moving on to culture in each country, I'll break these down by each country. So the culture in Greece, the natural language is Greek. The most prominent religion that is practiced is Greek Orthodox. So the Greeks enjoy having lots of conversations about culture and history, as most European countries do, but they have strong beliefs on issues pertaining to religion and politics, which is not surprising. That's just generally, I feel like, a rule of thumb that when you're traveling to a new country, bringing up religion and politics and money is something that's considered taboo. So that is still true in Greek culture. So you should also avoid criticizing Greece or the Greek people. Sometimes they will kind of poke fun of themselves and their life, but accepting criticism for outsiders is not as accepted. It's also important to avoid certain hand gestures. The American OK sign is considered obscene to them, and the mutsa, which is an open hand facing outward gesture. So like when you do stop in Western cultures, holding your hand up can also be considered offensive and insulting. Moving on to culture in Italy. Similarly, the topics to avoid include politics, the mafia, private family issues, and private income. Italians are often big jokesters. They tell graphic jokes. But when, like I said, in the other, like with Greeks, when you are being kind of negative about Italian lifestyle or anything related to them, you kind of should keep those things to yourself. Adding that additional criticism is kind of frowned upon if you are not actually from the country. As we know, that would be considered very offensive. On the contrary, though movies, sports, art, travel, fashion are good topics of discussion. That's something that you'll see throughout many European cultures. Also, another thing to consider, there are Italian negotiation styles. So before doing business there, you should see the way that meetings are conducted and how this can pertain to your business practices. Moving on to culture in France. French have a lot of kind of little nuances to their culture. They do really appreciate it if you try to speak French when you are in meetings with other French people. They really want to help you with your language development. So even if you don't know that much, people will be more accepting if you are attempting to kind of immerse yourself in their culture by using their language. La bise is a kiss on the cheek, and usually do that once on each side. Certain regions do it even more than that, but it depends on the region. And if you are exchanging la bise, you are not supposed to shake hands. You kind of do one or the other. Another thing is addressing people with tu, which is the informal term for you, so you're supposed to use vous instead. French organizations are pretty hierarchical, and communication kind of becomes muddled. And so they say that like if you want to speak to someone, speak to them directly. Something also to consider in business practices. They consider chewing gum in public very vulgar. You should keep your hands out of your pocket when in public. And two gestures that are considered offensive are slapping your open palm over your kind of closed fist and then snapping your fingers. And then finally, just something to consider in general, politeness is very important to the French. They do not really like rude people, and this is something especially considering business practices. So the French are very, very into the rules and regulations. They have low tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity, and so they're reluctant to take risks, but they are one of the fastest economic growing countries in the EU. Culture in Spain, along with the others kind of mentioned of politics and religion and making fun of the country when you're not actually from there. Topics to avoid include bullfighting, machismo, and feminism. So although the Spanish are usually very animated, you shouldn't use excessive gestures and avoid things like backslapping or hugging in initial phases of business relationships. But once you build a stronger relationship with business associates, you can use friendly gestures, and hugging may become more acceptable. Just keep in mind to follow the lead of your partner when you're discussing potentially controversial subjects, kind of following in line of if they are uncomfortable with the situation, or the other people in the group are uncomfortable with the situation or not. And it's just important to know that the Spanish are much more laid back than a lot of the other European cultures. Politics. So the general political system and climate in each various country within the region includes, like I said, all countries are within the EU. Greece has a parliamentary republic, Italy has a parliamentary republic, France has a semi-presidential republic, and Spain has a parliamentary constitutional monarchy. So all of these countries work together within the EU despite their slightly different political systems. And this has helped a lot in keeping peace throughout the EU. Obviously, over time, they have had issues, but this is something that they have found that works together. And they have large meetings to work with each other despite these political differences. So overall, what does all of this mean for international business within the region of the southern EU as a whole? So like any situation, you should just be aware of the cultural taboos when you're going to a new country. Consider that each country within the EU is different. They're separate. They all have their own unique qualities. It shouldn't be thought of like each state in the U.S. They should be thought of as separate countries. And then before you are doing business with a country, you should just have extensive knowledge of the country, the history that you've shared with them, the rules and regulations that you're going to be a part of before you start doing business. And just in general, to prevent kind of a culture shock, cross-cultural awareness will improve kind of the potential of having strong and lasting business relations. So if you're considering all of these aspects, you're way more likely to have a strong business relationship, despite the fact that you have a lot of different cultural views than some of these countries.